Good morning, everybody. I like that. That's good. Start off with a little bit of a demonstration. So, how would you describe that bottle if you were to describe it to your friend? Liquid? The container is, right? But was the liquid there? About 400. What else? What about the liquid? Pretty clear, colorless, right? When I shake it, it turns blue. And then we'll just let it sit for a while and it'll go colorless again. We've just had an observation, right? Formulate a hypothesis for me. Why is it that it's changing color when I shook it? There is a reaction. Let's get a little more deeper, though. What's happening? Energy. So where did the energy come from? Okay, so I shook the bottle and it changed colors. Okay, that's good. How could I test that hypothesis? I can make it cold. Okay. So let's suppose we put in a stir bar and I stirred it, right? That would be putting energy into it. And let's suppose it doesn't change color. Would that support our hypothesis or disprove our hypothesis? It would disprove the hypothesis, right? Okay. Notice I didn't say prove the hypothesis. I said support the hypothesis. You technically can't ever prove, without a shadow of a doubt, a hypothesis. You can only disprove them, right? That's the scientific method. Notice it's gone colorless again. And now, if I shake it, it will go blue again. What other hypothesis might we come up with? We've got the energy hypothesis. We've got a way to test it. What else might we have as a hypothesis? What happens when I shake it? Is the bottle full? Is it empty? We've got this much liquid, but what's above it?
It could be mixing with the air in the bottle.
Okay, we've got air in the bottle, right? So is air reactive? Can be, right? What is in air? Oxygen. So what might we formulate as a hypothesis now? What's happening?
Dissolve more oxygen when you shake it.
Okay, right. When I shake the bottle, maybe I'm dissolving more air, which brings more oxygen in the bottle, and that's what's responsible for changing color. How might I test that hypothesis? I know that air is made up of largely nitrogen, which is considered not terribly reactive, and oxygen, which is considered reactive. So how might I test the hypothesis that he just came up with, that air is getting in there and that's what's causing the reaction to occur?
Put a different atmosphere inside it.
Okay, I could put a different atmosphere inside it. So maybe I blow a bunch of nitrogen in there and I shake it, and I could tell whether or not the color changes or not, right? And then I could also put oxygen in it, right? I could bubble oxygen gas through it and see whether or not it changes colors. Okay? It actually turns out it's the oxygen that's responsible for this, and we'll talk a little bit more about it today. Okay? But in this class, everything is going to be about structure, shapes, and functions, and that's a demonstration to get us in there. So today what we're going to do is I'm going to introduce to you the course. We're going to talk a little bit about how we learn. This is a different type of course than most of you have ever had. Okay? It's funner in a lot of respects. Okay? It is also like learning a foreign language. You're going to be, especially this first semester, you're going to be learning a lot of new terms that you've never been familiar with. You're going to learn a new language this semester. Okay? So we're going to talk a little bit about how we learn and why that's important. We're going to talk a little bit about mindset. Many of you have heard rumors from your other classmates about the horrors of organic chemistry, right? You've heard them. I'm sure you've heard them, right? I know you've heard them. But it's all about your mindset. This class is not impossible. This class is not the same 3-hour class as perhaps another topic, okay? and that's unfortunate that we don't give you more credit for it, but that's just the way it is, okay? And if you can get yourself in the right mindset that you're here to learn, you're here to grow, you're not here to prove you're smart. We already know you're smart. I've got all the information in the database that tells me how smart you all are, right? Here, we're here to make mistakes. We're here to learn from those mistakes, and we're here to grow and learn and become smarter, okay? And then we'll talk a little bit about the syllabus. You've already got that on Canvas. I've given you a copy, and then we'll talk about why organic chemistry is important. And many of you probably already have that question. Why should I be concerned about organic chemistry? So from a class information point of view, I'm Dr. Doug Masterson. My office location is in IC 519. Does anybody know where that's at? What is IC? It is the International Center. That's where I'm at most of the time, right where that pin is, right? So there's the polymer building. There's the Polymer Reserve parking lot. There's Montague. Go across. That's Joseph Green Hall, which is being renovated. And I'm in this building on the 5th floor, room 519. I do have a open door policy. You can come up and see me anytime you want. If my door is open and I'm there, come on in, have a conversation. No problem, okay? I will have office hours over in the tutorial center in Walker Science on Tuesday from 10 to 11. So you know you'll be able to catch me there most of the time. I also have an academic office that I might tell you to meet me in, which is on this floor, room 437, which is on the opposite side of the floor, okay? My office phone number is 64714. Feel free to call me anytime between normal business hours. And of course, the easiest way to get in touch with me is through douglas.masterson@usm.edu. And one of the ways that I'm going to be getting in touch with you is through the Remind app. So have that. I'm going to put in all the due dates. So the day before an exam, the day before homework is due, whatever, it's going to come in, it's going to ding to you about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's going to say, don't forget, we got something due tomorrow. Okay, so all that's going to be there. The textbook for the class is by Solomons, Freely, and whoever the last author is now, Snyder. It's in the 12th edition. Many people have already contacted me and said, well, I could get the 11th edition or the 10th edition cheaper. Fine. Perfectly fine. I have this version on reserve over in the library if you need to make copies. The difference is there are some differences in the chapters in terms of material. We will be following exactly what is in this book. So if you have an older version of the book, just check the table of contents between what you have in this one and make sure everything's the same. If it's not, go over to the library, check it out, make a copy. I didn't say that. Make a copy of the pages that you need and you'll be fine. Organic chemistry that we're going to be covering in this class, both this semester and next semester, really hasn't changed much in 60 years. So they've added a few little bells and whistles, made the pictures a lot prettier in this version, but other than that, the information's about the same. Okay? You will need a model kit for the class. They have the model kits over in the bookstore. They look something like this. The one that I have is actually in a hard plastic case. You can get those. You can't get that particular model kit at the bookstore in the plastic case. Yours, I think, comes in a cardboard box or a plastic bag. It's the same thing that I have here, except this is in a nice hard plastic case. If you haven't bought yours yet, and you want one in a hard plastic case, because they do carry a lot easier in your book bags and etc., you can find them online at darlingmodels.com. And I think you can get them for about $20, $25, something like that in the hard case. But that's up to you. The model kit's the model kit. It is required. You will need to bring it to class quite often this semester. Okay? So I'll let you know more about that as time goes on. Let's talk a little bit about the course. The emphasis of this course is on the language of organic chemistry. We're going to do a lot of learning language and learning things, learning new techniques this semester. Next semester, we're going to do a ton of reactions. But this semester, we're going to be learning a lot of the foundational material, and it is the language of organic chemistry. You will start to think and talk like an organic chemist talks. At the end of this 2-course sequence, you will know about 95% of everything that I know. It's just that other 5% is deep. But the 95% that I use on a daily basis is sophomore level organic chemistry in my research. Okay? We're going to cover chapters 1 through 10 in the book. Graded work for this class is we'll have 3 50-minute exams. We'll have a comprehensive final. We'll have online homework through Sapling, which I need to get completely set up. We're going to have a video project. And we're going to have what are called inverted lectures. Those are lectures that you will have watched a video or watched a pencast or something, come to class and we'll do in-class exercises as groups and actually solve problems, okay? Now, I don't need to tell you this. You all know this. It is difficult because there's going to be a lot of material coming your way. How many of you are pre-med? Okay. What you're going to be learning this 2 semesters is what you're going to be learning the first couple of weeks in terms of quantity when you go to med school. This is why med school likes to know how well you did in organic chemistry, because a lot of information coming at you really quickly. Can you assimilate it? Okay? Not to mention the fact that you need to understand something about organic chemistry to understand biochemistry, and you need to understand biochemistry to understand medicine. Okay? So it's very, very important that you get that. However, it does not have to be more difficult than it needs to be. That part is all on the student. You all will make this course more difficult than it has to be by not setting a schedule and keeping up your good study habits. Okay, so good study habits are essential to success in the course, and you've got to come prepared reading, having come by reading the material beforehand. I assume when we get into class that you know what we're going to be talking about for the day. It's in the syllabus, what your reading assignments are for each day. Okay, so that's very, very important. The study tips that's on the syllabus, if you get that to me by 5 p.m. today, signed, as I mentioned in previous emails out to you, I'm going to give you 5 bonus points. That's 5% of an exam grade, okay, for reading these study tips and getting them back to me, okay? And so I really like this. I didn't write it. I wish I had, but this is by Dr. Libirko several years ago, and this is what he subtitled, What I Wish They Had Told Me as an Undergraduate. All of this stuff is absolutely correct in terms of things that you need to do to be successful in a course like this, okay? And there will be 1 question from that reading assignment on the first exam in September. So it's to your benefit to read it and turn it in. I'm giving you 5 points, okay? So how do we learn? I really like this cartoon strip. It's not particularly colorful, but it's great. So you've got 2 kids and a dog, right? And the one kid says, I taught Stripe how to whistle. The other kid looks at Stripe and says, I don't hear him whistling. And the other kid says, I taught him. I didn't say he learned it. Learning is not a team sport. What we're doing in here is teamwork. What we're doing in here is me being a facilitator to your learning, but you have to be willing to learn, okay? And there's the whole learning cycle. We'll talk a little bit more about some of those things. This comes from learning to learn. But notice there is words like active and experience and observation. It's active. If you want to learn this material, you have to actively participate. You cannot learn this material by osmosis. You cannot learn this material by watching me do it. I will be up at the board solving a problem, and each and every one of you will go, well, that was easy. And then you will go off and you'll go do your homework and you'll go, oh crap. Why does it look easy when I'm doing it? Because I've been doing it for over 20 years. It is second nature to me. It is not second nature to you yet, but it will be. It can be if you don't get frustrated and you enjoy the struggles to get to that point, okay? Now, not everybody has to like it as much as I do. I get that, okay? But don't get frustrated when you run up to a brick wall about your understanding with it. That's an opportunity for you to learn. That's an opportunity for you to grow. And I do not count those things against you. And I'll tell you more about that in just a minute. So we learn by making mistakes. We learn by our experience. And I think learning is talent development. Each and every one of you in this room are talented. And my job is to make sure that you leave this class more talented than you came in. Okay? Some of you, that will be a lot. Some of you, that will be kind of in the middle. But everybody, all boats will rise if you participate in the learning process of this course. I'm a big believer in the growth mindset. I've sent out a video about that, right? Some of you probably watched it, I hope, right? There are kind of 2 kinds of people, according to Carol Dweck. There are those of us with a growth mindset, and there are those of us with a fixed mindset, and we are not born with either. We can develop one or the other. It's easy to fall into a fixed mindset where you view failure as a limit to your possibilities. Oh, I'm not very good at math. Oh, I can't do organic chemistry. Yes, you can. It's not that difficult if you put your mind to it, okay? But people with a growth mindset look at their failures or their struggles as opportunities to grow. How many of you have ever played an instrument or participated in a sport? Just about every one of you, right? How much time did it take to practice, to get good? A lot. The same thing with organic chemistry. You're not going to be able to do it one time and solve one problem and all of a sudden you're just magical at it. It takes time, it takes practice, it takes a commitment, okay? So the good news is if you find yourself over here, know that you can change. Your mind is not rigid. It can develop into a growth mindset. You just have to work towards it. So when you see a failure and you feel frustrated, step back, take a deep breath, and approach it again. Don't quit, okay? The biggest obstacle to this class is quitting, okay? This class, everybody who has ever failed this class, and not the honor section, okay? There's very few people that have ever failed the honor section. But in general, you can always go back and look to they weren't doing their homework, they were missing class, and that's always the biggest predictor of success in this class, okay? Now that doesn't mean hard work will get you an A, but I guarantee that if you work hard and you work well, you will get a good grade in this class. You will pass, okay? So let's talk a little bit about the class format. They're going to be lecture and class discussions. Most of the time I lecture using PowerPoint, but I'll also be using the board, okay? The slides will be placed in Canvas, so as you're taking your notes, do not feel like you have to be writing every structure down or recording every word that I'm saying. I'm recording this lecture right now, and I will put it on YouTube after class at some point during the day. It may take me a few hours, but I will send out an email saying lecture's up on YouTube. So if you forgot something that I said, go back to the YouTube video, and you can watch it. You can go through it, okay? So if you haven't signed up and subscribed to my channel, it's USM OrgChem is my channel on YouTube. I think I sent out a link to everybody. We will have concepts tests during most classes. They're not graded. I'll lecture about something, I'll solve a problem, and then I'll tell you all to solve a problem. Give you about a minute to solve it. And I'll kind of gauge from how you all are looking, like whether it's, oh yeah, that's pretty easy, then I know to move on. If I look at everybody and they're kind of struggling through the problem, I know to go back and cover a few more topics. We'll also have inverted lectures, which will be group work. You have to be here to get those completed. We'll have online homework, and again, there will be some videos and pingcasts that go along with those inverted lectures, okay? Class behavior, I really don't need to say too much about it for you all. If you're late, please enter quietly and take the first available seat. Make sure that all your electronic devices are off unless I tell you to be using them. Silent mode, okay? Never answer a call during class. We don't Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, Pinterest, Snapchat, whatever the latest flavor of the day is in class, except maybe during inverted lectures. During inverted lectures, you can use any resources you need to find the answer and solve the problem, okay? Using your resources, okay? All questions should be directed to me during class unless we're having a class discussion. And if you disrupt the class in any way, you'll be asked to leave and forfeit your right to turn any assignments due that day. So let's talk a little bit about course grading. The inverted lectures are going to be worth about 150 points. You're going to have 10 of them during the semester at 15 points each, roughly 17% of the overall course grade. We'll have 3 regular exams, somewhere around 25 questions each exam, about 300 total points on all 3 of those exams, so that's going to be about 1/3 of the class grade. You'll have online homework, which is worth 200 points, about 22% of the overall course grade. We'll have a video project where I'll do a demonstration. You all will video it, and you will do a project based on that. We'll learn more about that later. That'll be worth 50 points. That's half an exam grade, right? And that's about 6% of the overall course grade. And then we're going to have a final exam, which will be cumulative, 200 points, worth about 22% of the overall course grade. And I have a little asterisk here. And the asterisk is because of my philosophy. Because I do believe in growth mindset, okay? This is my philosophy, and I'm going to take a moment to kind of read it to you. I hope you've all read it in the syllabus already. But I'm going to read it to you because I want to make sure everybody's clear about this. I believe that the primary goal of education is to grow and learn. Not to prove that you're smart, okay? But to grow and learn. I'm a believer in the growth mindset and the concept, or the growth mindset concept, and that we should all learn from our mistakes. I believe that students should be allowed to learn and improve throughout the semester. I promote this philosophy by allowing the final exam to replace your overall course grade if the final exam grade is higher than your cumulative course grade. However, to be eligible for this, you must have completed all assignments, exams, and projects during the semester. In other words, if you are working hard and you are improving throughout the entire semester, at the end, you still can get an A regardless of what your grade is. You can be going into the final with a C. Maybe. I hope not. But let's say you're going into the final with a C. You've completed everything. You've studied real hard. Each step of the way, you've gotten a little bit better. And on the final exam, you get a B. I'm going to give you the B. Or if you get an A, I'm going to give you the A. Because it's a cumulative final, and you've shown me that you can do it. Okay? So it is always possible in my class until the moment you turn in the final exam to get a better grade. Okay? So I want you to keep that in mind. Okay? But you have to have completed everything. You can't not have done the homework and then come in and said, well, I got an A on the final. Yeah, and the A plus everything else added up to whatever grade you got. I'm going to reward good work behavior, good work ethic, and growth. Okay? So it's never impossible to improve. So, does that sound fair to everybody? Okay. So there's no reason to drop the class. There's no reason to panic. You can always do better. Focus on your learning and let the grade take care of itself, and that will always serve you well. Okay? I've had students in the past that come to me, how do I earn a grade? You earn a grade by performing well throughout the semester, by learning, by growing. Okay? There's nothing at the end after everything's done that I can do. But what I can do is if you participate, if you grow, if you learn, we can get you to a better place than where you're currently at. And that's the overall goal of this. Okay? All exams will be offset such that the highest class score is 100%. But I'm not going to offset it more than 10%. Okay? So what does that mean? That means maybe I asked a question that was a little unfair, maybe a little too difficult for whatever reason, and everybody missed it. And it was worth 5 points. Well, everybody gets that 5 points. Okay? So, but it won't go any higher than 10%. So if the highest exam score is a 90, I bump the 90 up to 100 and everybody gets those 10 points. If the highest class score is an 80, I still just bump it up 10 points or 10% points, okay? So note there are no makeup exams in the syllabus. The exam schedule is already set, okay? We will have that exam on that day regardless of where we get to in our lectures. I may have to adjust the exam a little bit. But on September whatever, that's exam one day, unless there's a hurricane, a fire, something that shuts down the university, okay? That's going to be our exam days. So you know when they are, okay? If you have to miss for any legitimate reason, you need to let me know in advance, and I'll work with you. What I mean by no makeup exams are I overslept. Can I take a makeup? No, okay? There's no oversleeping kind of things here, okay? But if you happen to be hospitalized or something serious happens, I will work with you, okay? Things that are clearly beyond your control, we will work with you. There are no drop exams either, okay? So my grading scale is a little more broad than most, and the reason is because several years ago I got to thinking about why do we devote most of our grading scale to failure? Think about it. An A is 90 to 100 in typical classes. A B is 80 to 89. Where does the F start?
64, 63.
Yeah. Do you know if I got 64% of all the grants I ever wrote funded, people would think I was a genius? I'm in the business of failure. I apply to things to get money to do my research where the funding rate is 5 and 10%. Right? So why do we devote the vast majority of the scale to failure? It makes no sense to me. So I expanded it. So an A, 90 to 100. I'll take a B down to 77. I'll take a C down to 67. I'll take a D all the way down to 55. Below 55% is an F. However, I can honestly tell you, for everybody who's ever worked really hard in this class, nobody has ever gotten below a C. The only time I have ever assigned a D or an F to a student is because there are blanks in the grading sheet, because they didn't try. If you try and you work real hard, you can pass this class with a decent grade. Okay, I promise that. There are several student learning outcomes. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on them. They're in the syllabus. These are the things that at the end of the semester we expect you to leave at least with an understanding of. Being able to identify functional groups. And all of this is really kind of focusing on the language of organic chemistry and on structure and function of molecules, okay? And so you can also look in the syllabus for how the SLOs and the course grades relate, okay? I've put that, what my thoughts are on that in the syllabus as well. Okay, if you look in your syllabus, you'll see a class schedule. Today, August the 16th, this is the introduction, the syllabus, and general chemistry review. Assigned study tips due for extra credit by 5 o'clock today. Okay? On Friday the 18th, you will have a sub because I actually have to go to Washington, D.C., but you'll be talking about chapters 1.1 to 1.7, structure and Lewis structures, kind of a general chemistry review. Okay? I expect that you have read that. Okay? On the 23rd, that's the last day to drop and get a 100% refund without my permission. Anytime after that, withdrawing from the class will give you a W on your transcript. And notice on September the 13th, we will have exam 1 on chapters 1 through 3. Now let's suppose, for whatever reason, I don't know, let's just say there's a storm and class gets canceled this day, and so we're behind today. We're still going to have exam here, but since we were behind today, that exam will only cover 3.1 to 3.7. It won't cover the next material. I'll go through and edit the exam to make sure that it's covering the right material. But the exam day stays firm unless natural disaster of some kind forbids us from being on school that day. Okay? So this is clearly not the entire class schedule. It's just a snippet of what's in the syllabus. You have all that information available to you. Are there any questions about any of that before I move on? Nope? Okay. Online homework will be by Sapling. You all have used Sapling before. I need to go in and get it all set up. This is an old snippet from fall of 14. But I'll send you an email when it's ready and available. The due dates for the chapter 1 and all that kind of stuff will be made readily available to you. Sapling is good at a variety of things, but just working the Sapling problems usually isn't enough to be really proficient at everything, okay? You will need to be participating in the inverted lectures in class, which will be a lot more complicated problems than what we have on Sapling. Okay, they'll require you to think more deeply than what the Sapling problems typically do. And you'll need to be reading proactively and participating on your own in that regard. You all received, I think, an email from Dr. Miller that we no longer use Blackboard at the university. So if you hear me say Blackboard, it's just a reflex, okay? I mean Canvas. And right now, if you went into Canvas, you would see the syllabus, you would see the instructions to get on the Remind, and you would see the introduction. And I think I've uploaded the retired exams. So I've got several retired exams that I've uploaded. Not that you will see those questions ever again, but it'll give you an idea of what an exam of mine looks like. Okay, so I don't want you walking in on the first day of the first exam and go, I have no idea how he's going to test. That's not what I'm trying to measure. I'm trying to measure how well you perform. I want you to understand how I'm going to ask questions. So please look at those. Those are good study materials for you to use as you prepare for all the exams. I also want to take a bit of time and talk to you all about research opportunities. Any student who's interested in doing research in organic chemistry could come talk to me anytime, and I can direct you to where people are looking for students to work with right now. I'm now in the provost's office. That's why I'm over in the International Center. And so I've got one graduate student. I've got a couple of undergraduates that still work with me. I'm full. I don't have any room really to take any more students this semester. But I'd be happy to talk with you if you're interested in research and actually direct you to somebody who might be willing to take you. If you're a chemistry major, you are required to do some research in order to graduate, and I'd recommend not putting that off until your last semester. But there are other benefits as well. Many of you raised your hand about being pre-med. At some point, you're going to need people to give you letters of evaluation, aka recommendation for med school. If you go up to a professor who taught you in a large class and they never really knew you other than the fact that you got a good grade in their class, where are they going to be able to send that letter of evaluation? And guess what? That's already on the transcript, and the people who are looking at your letters go, well, that's not helpful at all. Letters of evaluation or letters of recommendation need to be able to give the reviewer additional information beyond the transcript. The only way that you can do that is by interacting with your professors in a manner outside of class that gives them those insights. Research is one way to do that. So some of the benefits are you can do research and actually get a publication. So that's something else you can put on your resume when you're getting ready to apply for med school or graduate school or whatever it is that you're planning on doing. You can get additional course credit. If you need an elective here or there, or you need an hour, you can sign up for variable credit courses to get research experience. Again, that letter of recommendation is so important. And there are some individuals here on campus and in the chemistry department that have money available to pay undergraduates to do research. So if you need a part-time job, might be able to get you 10 to 12 hours a week getting paid to do research in somebody's laboratory. So I would highly recommend that you think about research opportunities as early as possible, because that's going to help you build your resume, get you those better letters of recommendation, and increase your chances of getting accepted into medical, graduate, whatever, or just get a job, whatever your desires are when you leave the University of Southern Mississippi. I'm not going to spend too much time on my research, just tell you a little bit. We've been working on some molecules that look like this. This is actually a glutathione analog. Glutathione is a peptide that exists in everybody's cells, everybody's blood. And it turns out that it has some level of antimalarial activity. And we've been working on making alternative derivatives of it, where instead of a hydrogen being here, we replaced it with a carbon atom. And it turns out that this glutathione actually inhibits glutathione reductase, which is an enzyme. And if you reduce the activity of glutathione reductase, it increases oxidative stress. You may have heard that term before. And it turns out that when you're under oxidative stress, the malarial parasite tends to die. So it's one way in which you can fight malaria. And so we've done a lot of studies on this, had several papers. I've got a graduate student currently at the University of Vermont who's doing an internship on how to do some molecular modeling on a computer for these types of molecules. So we're still actively involved in this, studying it and publishing on it, but it's kind of slowing down these days. Some other things that we've been involved in lately are developing molecules that look like this that can be used as catalysts. The nice thing about these catalysts is they're completely organic molecules. They contain no metals, and so there's no metal wastes. And so we've been trying to develop these types of catalysts that can actually be used to help us form carbon-carbon bonds. You'll find out that there's only about a handful of ways to make carbon-carbon bonds. Out of all the things we can do, we're limited by how we can build molecules, by how we form carbon-carbon bonds. And so developing catalysts that can help us with that is certainly of industrial and academic interest, but also being able to make molecules that can do it without the aid of toxic metals certainly has an environmental impact as well. And so we've been involved in that in the last couple of years. So that'll kind of give you an idea of some of the things that I've been working on while I've been here. So in the time that we have left, I want to kind of introduce organic chemistry in general. And so you really can't talk about organic chemistry until you really understand what chemistry itself is. Now, most of you, when you hear the word chemistry, you cringe. I know that, right? Most people do. My neighbor, when I moved in 14 years ago, and well, what do you do? Oh, I'm a chemist. Oh my God, right? So you get kind of comments like that. But really, chemistry is nothing more than the study of matter and the changes that it undergoes. That's what we do. We study matter, and we study how it changes when we do certain things to it. And that has allowed us to do all kinds of things: medicines, materials, the whole 9 yards. And really, there are two main branches to chemistry, okay? And I call them main branches because there's a lot of people that will subdivide this into the tiniest little detail as well. But there are two. There is what we're going to be studying this semester, which is organic chemistry. Organic chemistry was a term coined by Berzelius in about 1807, so a long time ago. Organic chemistry is not a new subject by any stretch of the imagination. Originally, it meant matter derived from living things. So organic chemistry and biochemistry are joined at the hip. Now, they have diverged in recent decades. I shouldn't say years. It's been a long time. Okay? But they had a common origin. Matter derived from living things. Study of things that came from living beings or living things on the earth. Today, however, we no longer use this definition. Today we use the definition of the study of carbon-containing compounds. And technically, to be an organic molecule, you must have at least one carbon-hydrogen bond in the molecule. Okay? Carbon dioxide is a carbon-containing molecule, but organic it is not. It has no carbon-hydrogen bond anywhere. Okay? The other branch, can anybody guess what it is? Inorganic chemistry, right? Now, my inorganic colleagues would really cringe at what I'm about to say, okay? But it's basically dead rocks, okay? That's everything else on the periodic table. And yes, the periodic table is very important, and all these elements can do fantastic things, but from an organic chemist point of view, all of this stuff is just placeholders for where carbon is. Carbon is so important because carbon can do so much. It is the only element that seems to be able to form infinite number of bonds to itself. We can keep adding carbons. I mean, think about a big polymer that has a huge molecular weight. It's just nothing more than a bunch of carbon bonds connected together, and we seem to be able to keep adding. You can't do that with oxygen. You can't do that with sulfur. You can't do that with silicon. You can't seem to do that with any other element except carbon. And so carbon has this special place, and it sits on the special place in the periodic table that is so great and allows us to do so many things. So when we're talking about organic chemistry, we're going to be talking about carbon, of course. We're going to be talking about hydrogen. Nitrogen will be prominent, oxygen, maybe some of the halogens, sulfur. But really, we're talking about a very small piece of the periodic table. And so, to me, that's what makes organic chemistry so great, is because I don't have to worry about all the orbitals that you learned about in general chemistry, or what happens to all these things way down here. It doesn't matter in this class. What matters is what does carbon do, what does hydrogen do, what does nitrogen do, and what does oxygen do. We're not going to focus a whole lot on a huge part of the periodic table. So that's definitely a plus. Let's talk a little bit about some early organic chemistry. It started off many hundred years ago. We had this idea called vitalism. And it was the early belief that organic compounds could only be prepared by a living thing due to some vital force. Okay? Now, I'm not here to talk about religion. I'm not here to talk about anything like that. I'm not here to change your mind about anything. I'm here to teach you the history of it. Okay? So there were individuals that believed in the vital force. And so if you had an organic compound, it had to be derived from a living thing. And that living thing had some vital force. Well, Friedrich Wöhler came along, and he's considered the father of organic chemistry because he made an observation. He did not set out to disprove vitalism, but his experiment ultimately did prove that it is not necessary for organic things to come from living things. Okay? And what he observed was that an inorganic compound could be converted into an organic compound without going through a living being. Okay? And this happened around 1828. And what he did was he took ammonium cyanate, an inorganic rock, and he put it in water and he heated it. And in doing so, he started to smell the disgusting aroma of urine. Well, urine only comes from living things, right? I mean, living things urinate. And the reason that it smells the way that it does is because of this compound here called urea. Makes sense, right? Urea, urine, right? This is an organic compound because it came from a living thing. It's not the current definition of an organic compound because it doesn't have a CH bond. But it was only found in living things up until Friedrich Wöhler's time when he took ammonium cyanate and he converted it into urea. And so this simple little experiment of taking a rock, putting it in water and heating it and smelling urine was all that was necessary to disprove the vitalism theory. Okay? Organic molecules could be derived from non-living things. Okay? Water wasn't living, ammonium cyanate wasn't living, the flame wasn't living, so it wasn't processed through some living being. Okay? It turns out that ammonium cyanate and urea are isomers of one another. They have the same number and types of atoms, but what's different about them? The structure. That's exactly right. This has a different connectivity than this. It has a different type of structure. Structure is so important. If you're good at drawing three-dimensional objects, you're going to love this class because we're going to be thinking in 3 dimensions all the time. Okay? If you struggle with three-dimensional stuff, we're going to be working with models to help us understand that better. And you will be able to understand it better by using models. Okay? And then after about 20 years of doing it, you'll be able to do it in your head. Okay? But it takes a while. It took me a long time to be able to manipulate molecules in 3 dimensions without the use of a model. And today I still use models for things that I'm not terribly familiar with. Okay? So this observation allowed organic chemistry as we currently know it to replace the theory of vitalism. So, since everything's about structure, we can define a compound uniquely if we know the precise arrangement of the atoms, right? This is the precise arrangement of the atoms in ammonium cyanate. This is the precise arrangement of the atoms in urea, right? And in this early structural theory, there were 3 main players. And the one that I'm going to focus on today is August Kekulé. Okay? Now, Cooper and Butler-Ov were also important, but I think Kekulé's legacy kind of outshines those other 2. Okay? That's a picture of the handsome man right there back in the 1800s. Okay? Now, this is a quote, not my words. And I find this kind of interesting, but he was neither a particularly good practical chemist, he was all thumbs in the laboratory, and he was boring as heck as a teacher. He bored people to death. I hope I don't do that to you, okay? But his main contribution to chemistry was largely theoretical and speculative. He actually had some training early on in architecture. What do architects need to be able to do? Think in 3 dimensions, right? And so he was able to think about carbon and the other atoms coming together in 3-dimensional space and what that might mean, okay? And so at the time he began most of his research, chemists largely felt you couldn't know the structure because anything that you did to a molecule to try to probe its structure would alter its structure. And he said that's nonsense. If I take a building and I knock it down and I look at the pieces, yes, I've changed the structure, but I can look at what the pieces are, and I can get an idea of what that building probably looked like. Just like in a car accident. When a car hits a brick wall, it flies to pieces, but they can tell you whether or not that was a Ford Mustang, a Chevy Corvette, or, Toyota Corolla, right? By looking at the pieces that come off of it. And so that same thing can be done. Now, he told of a waking dream that he had in the 1800s. Of seeing these atoms coming together and arranging themselves in 3 dimensions in space. And so from that, he postulated 3 things. He postulated that carbon atoms can combine with one another to form chains, meaning we can keep adding carbons to carbons and making new molecules. He postulated that carbon always had a valency of 4. What does that mean? It will form 4 bonds. Now, it can form 4 single bonds. It can form 3 single bonds and a double bond. It can do all kinds of things, but it's going to form 4 bonds. And he also postulated that the study of reaction products gives structural information. By probing it due to chemistry, we can get some structural information. Okay? Now, the blue bottle experiment that we just did, this is how it is right now. This is the structure. It's called methylene white. When I shake it and oxygen goes in, I am oxidizing it to methylene blue. What's the difference in the structure? Okay, we've got a difference of a hydrogen here and a hydrogen there, right? What else is different? Notice we got a double bond here and now we've got a single bond, don't we? There's differences in structure. And so here we have taken this molecule and we have reduced it because we have added electrons to reduce it to get what is known as methylene white. And then when I introduce oxygen, it oxidizes it, removes those electrons and those hydrogens, and gives me methylene blue. Okay? Now, the interesting thing is, does anybody know where these 2 hydrogens and these 2 electrons are coming from in that bottle?
Air.
The electrons are being removed by the air, but where are the electrons coming from? As I let it sit, it goes colorless, so it's going to pick up 2 electrons and 2 protons and become the white compound. It turns out What is in there is simply glucose. Glucose and methylene blue with a little base to make it basic. Glucose is a reducing sugar. You probably heard that term in biology. Okay? If not, you will have learned it at some point in the future. So it's a simple little experiment. All right. We are about 5 minutes. I'm going to try to get through this slide and then have you do something with the little note card that I've given you. Okay? Electronic theory, electrons are the glue that hold the structure together, right? And so we're talking about bonds. In this class, we're going to largely be focusing on covalent bonds. In general chemistry, you largely focused on ionic compounds, okay? You did talk about covalent as well, but a lot of what you talked about were salts and things of that nature. But we're going to be talking about covalent bonds, okay? And so electronic theory allows us to explain the chemical changes. We know that it's the electrons that are responsible. We can ignore the nuclei for the large part in terms of chemists. The thing that separates chemists from physicists, chemists study electrons, physicists study nuclei. Okay? We're only concerned about the electrons, and it just so happens that carbon comes in with so many electrons, nitrogen comes in with more, so on and so forth, right? And so by studying the electrons, we know something about the chemistry. We know that reactions occur and atoms move because they're moved by the electrons. And we know that the reaction mechanism, how a reaction occurs, is because of the electrons. Okay, you learned a lot of reactions in general chemistry, but did you really learn how they occur? How the atoms have to interact with one another for that reaction to happen? Sometimes you probably did, but by and large you didn't. You learned that a salt, right, will react with this and you'll get a precipitate. But you didn't really talk about how the electrons are moving for that to happen. We're going to learn about that in this class, okay? So let's stop there for today. We've got 4 minutes left. I want you to take your note card. And on the front of the note card, I want you to write your student ID number. And I want you to write your name, printed please, so I can read it, because I got to learn everybody's name. All right, it's going to take me a while. And then on the back, I want you to write just a couple of sentences about how you feel about being prepared for this class, okay? And do not write it as you think I want to hear it. It's a little statement to yourself, okay?